Thank you all for joining us for Leadership Gold, How to Be a Leader Worth Following. I am Allie Summers with AAOE, and I am joined by Ed Crow. If you are earning CNE, CME, HBMA, or NASBA credits, please get out your mobile app and navigate to this session and click Check In. We will be reading the CEU code soon. If you are earning AAPC credits, you will enter a check-in code at the end. You can prepare now by downloading the AAPC code card if you haven't already. It is available in the session handout, and AAOE staff will be putting the link in the chat. Before I turn it over to our speaker, I just have a few housekeeping notes to review. This session has been pre-recorded. A live chat is available just below the video for you to post questions for our speaker to answer in real time. This is also an excellent opportunity to connect with our other attendees to see how they are handling these issues and topics in their own practices. If you are experiencing any technical issues or have any questions about the virtual conference platform, please call 800-247-9699. AAOE staff are available to help. Now it is time to enter your CEU check-in code for CNE, CME, HBMA, and NASBA. The code for this session is 360276. Enter this in the mobile app by checking into this session. We will give you a few moments to enter that now. AAOE staff will also enter it into the chat. Okay, let's get to our session. Ed Crow works with executives and business owners who are struggling with people problems, such as adapting to changing business conditions and customer, investor, or community expectations. He turns irrelevant and ineffective HR functions into strategic contributors by aligning HR with the business objectives. As a result, human resources actually drives business results. Crow's clients often refer to him as the HR doctor because of his ability to quickly diagnose and treat their ailments in their workplaces. To date, Crow has completed over 700 projects for more than 250 clients across nearly all industries. I will now turn it over to Ed to get us started.
Hi, thanks, Allie. Appreciate you having me. And welcome, everyone. This is a topic that is actually one of my favorites. When I think about leadership today, it's harder than ever. And that's probably why you've chosen to attend this session, is that you're in a leadership role and you're craving those things that will give you perhaps a leg up, maybe make your job a little bit easier, find that magic potion that's going to bring your team together. I don't know if I'm going to give you the magic potion today, but what I can guarantee you is you're going to have some ingredients to help make your own magic potion. And you see, that's critical because what works in one organization may not work in another. One style may not work across all organizations. And so when we're leading our people, we have to come up with our own magic potion. And so leaders today have to be flexible. I mean, when you think about it, look at your level of competition today. Your margins are probably shrinking. The pressure of the organization to perform in today's marketplace is probably greater than ever. And so as leaders, we're being asked to lead a dynamic, living, breathing organization through these difficult times. And yet we're going to see that leadership starts within us. And that's one of the recurring themes that you're going to hear today. And so I want you to just take a moment and think about the last mistake you made as a business professional. We've all made them. Let's get that out there now. We've all made them, right? Me too. I've made my share of mistakes. I want you to think about the last mistake that you made, and go ahead and jot it down. Don't put it in the chat, but go ahead and jot it down, because I want you to reflect on that several times throughout the next hour or so that we have together. And as you're jotting that down, I want you to think about what were the impacts of that mistake on your team, and jot that down as well. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to beat you up, nor should you beat yourself up for making a mistake, because we all make them. The reality is that we have to keep from repeating those mistakes. What can we learn from them? What do our people need to see from us coming out of that mistake? And that's going to be one of our themes today. It's going to be one of our gold nuggets that we're going to attack as we're looking at how to be a leader worth following. Because, it's been said that a wise person learns from his or her mistakes. And there's truth in that. But I also want you to think about whether or not you can learn from others' mistakes. You see, we can find leaders today across any spectrum: politics, business, faith communities, in the local community, not-for-profits, you name it, right? There are leaders everywhere. And with the 24/7 news cycle and social media, these public-facing leaders are under constant scrutiny. And thank goodness that hopefully many of us are not in that 24/7 news cycle where we're under that constant scrutiny. But I want you to think about the missteps that these people make, simply because they're human, just like you or I. What can we learn from those things? That's where true wisdom comes from. How do we not only keep from repeating the mistakes that we've made, how do we learn from others' mistakes so that we don't make the mistakes of those that have gone before us? So that's this whole idea of it's okay to make mistakes is something that we're going to learn from today as we're all coming together in this idea of leadership gold. And so what I want you to think about, after being a bit of a Debbie Downer there, is how can you learn from other people's successes? So if smart people learn from their own mistakes and smarter people learn from others' mistakes, then it's only the truly wisest people that learn from others' successes. And that's a view of John Maxwell. I've had the opportunity to hear this man speak. I've taken his certification class. I've read countless of his books. And it always comes back to this idea of learning and self-development. How can we be better leaders for our people? And so I'm going to challenge you with something today. Perhaps as we're talking today, your mind starts to drift. I know it's hard when we're in a virtual environment like this to stay focused for an hour. Perhaps I go down a path and you say, oh, Ed, I already know that. I'm going to tune out. I want you to stop yourself when you find your brain going down that path and ask yourself one simple question. Why is it that I'm hearing this again right now? What in this message do I need to hear right now? I was giving a talk. It was actually the last live talk I gave back in February to a group. And the group organizer that brought me in had heard me speak at a state conference on the topic of becoming a person of influence. And she said, Ed, I'm so glad you're here at our local organization to talk about this. I got so much out of it. So forgive me if I sort of tune out and I'm on my phone or something. And I just smiled and said, okay. And afterwards she came up to me and she said, Ed, I didn't tune out once. You brought new things to the table. There were things that I don't think I heard before. And see, that's the value of staying engaged. So think about the gap. And what I call the gap for all of us is that difference between what we know we should be doing based on our knowledge and experiences and what we're actually doing. That performance gap, if we can narrow that down, we will be the most effective leaders that we can be. So let's go down this path of leadership gold together. And let's take a look at what we're going to focus on. So in our time together, and we don't obviously have a lot of time, but we're going to hit these 8 items. I want you to think about if you're currently at the top of your organization, or you're in maybe the C-suite of your organization and you're lonely up there. Why is that? You've probably heard people say, gosh, it's lonely at the top. I disagree. If you're lonely at the top, something is wrong, and we're going to explore that. Why is it so critical that we lead ourselves well? That's going to be a big focus of our talk here today, because leading ourselves well is probably one of the most difficult aspects of being a leader today. And then we're going to look at something that I often struggle with, quite honestly, and that's how do we handle criticism and how do we approach defining moments? We are in a defining moment right now, in case you hadn't noticed. Are we able to pivot ourselves, pivot our businesses to handle current events and keep our team together and engaged and providing the high level of services to our patients that we need them to do? We're going to talk about this concept of the leader as a continual learner as well. You see, as business changes today, there's always something new that we can learn. I recently wrapped up a coaching project with a small bank. The board of directors had brought me in to coach their CEO, who was really struggling to get the buy-in from the people to her vision. Now, she had been with the organization for a number of years in a role as a CFO. And due to some other things happening at the bank and the exiting of the current CEO, she was made interim and then named CEO. And one of the things that folks were finding with her was her inability to communicate her vision effectively. And the more that I coached with her, one of her biggest challenges was in failing to lead herself well. You see, she didn't have a college degree. She had formal banking education, but no college degree. And her view of that on herself was holding her back. In reality, no one on her team cared that she didn't have that paper on the wall. They cared about the knowledge that she had of the banking industry. And we worked through that. And so one of the things that is so critical for us is not about what we know now, but what can we learn? And today is just going to be the start of some of that for you. Because ultimately, we're going to learn what our leadership legacy should be. What do we want it to be? And how do we get our people to follow us? How do we get to be that leader worth following? So let's go back to this idea of if you're lonely at the top, something's wrong. Take a look at these mountain climbers. No one ever gets to the top alone. Go ahead and look up expeditions to Mount Everest. You'll see it takes an entire village to get to the top of Mount Everest. And why is that? We have to have guides to get us there. We have to have folks that know the weather patterns. We have to have folks that know the trails. We have to have people carrying supplies. Those supplies are not just food and water, obviously, but oxygen and tents and shelter. We have to have medics because there will invariably be injuries and health scares along the way. So when you hear about these people making it to the top of Mount Everest, it's not an individual achievement. It is truly a team achievement. And yet so often when we get to the top and we're standing on the mountain, we say, I made it, right? I did it. But we really didn't do it. Our team helped us get there. Think about the old game. Maybe you played this when you were a kid. I certainly did. We played it a lot at the beach, but King of the Hill, right? Where you found a hill, you found a sand dune, and you got to the top. And what was the whole game about, right? Someone else had to knock you off the perch, right? And so people would be coming at you from all different angles, and you'd push them or wrestle them down to the ground and get them up. But the whole goal was to be taken down. And you see, that's because you clawed your way to the top, crawling over other people, wrestling other people to get up there. But if we do that in business and we leave this trail of people behind us that we've stepped on, there is no way we can hold the top of the mountain. It's impossible. And so I want you to think about, based on where you're at in your career right now, who has helped you to get to where you are currently? How did they help you to get there? What were the things you learned along the way? You know, when I think about these things, I go back to one of our first slides that talked about, can you learn from others' mistakes? And you see, I've had the pleasure of working for some really, really good managers throughout my career. And I've also had my share of duds. And as I look back, I can honestly say I've learned as much from the duds as I've learned from the good ones. Because I learned early on in my career that I didn't want to be like that person. I didn't want to lead people like that. There was something in their aura that was not magnetic. And so this is your next little bit of thought work here. I'd like you to jot down, again, not necessarily in the chat, but jot down on a piece of paper, who are the leaders that you've worked for that you've learned the most from? And again, don't just limit yourself to the people that you really have a lot of respect for. Who are the leaders that you've learned the most from? And what was it about them that helped you to learn? Go ahead and take a moment to jot that down on your paper. So what I want you to think about when you're on top of the mountain and you want to be that king of the hill, right? The moment that you're standing there proud and just, you know, you're probably sitting down right now, you know, sit upright in your seat, nice and erect and body postures up. And you're like, yes, I'm master of all I survey, right? Now I want you to take your hands and I want you to act like you're pushing someone down, okay, down, down, down. What is physically happening to you? I just had you sit up nice and tall, but then I told you to push someone down. I'm willing to bet your entire upper body started to shrink down as you were making that pushing motion down. And you see, that's what happens when we hold other people down. We make ourselves smaller too. But when we pull someone up, we want to pull someone up that mountain with us. What happens? Our body straightens up, we get taller, we feel more powerful because we're pulling people along with us. That's the mark of true leadership. How do we pull people up the mountain to us to see the view that we see from the top of the mountain versus pushing them down and keeping them in the dark? Here's how we do this. I want you to avoid positional thinking. And what I mean by that is if you look on your business card and it says, well, I'm the CEO, I'm the CFO, I'm the Chief Administrative Officer, whatever your business card happens to say. And you think that because you have that title, you are a leader. That's called positional thinking. People will only hang with you for a very, very short period of time because of your title. Until you show them that you care about them and that you're willing to work for them, you won't get the respect and trust that you need to move your organization forward. The flip side, or excuse me, the next thing is, if we're going to bring people with us, we have to remember that people are going to succeed and they're going to fail. And we have to allow them to make mistakes. If we are always there making sure they don't make mistakes, that's micromanagement. Now, we don't want them making some catastrophic mistakes, so I'm not advocating that you stand by and watch them burn the house down. I think you understand what I'm trying to say, though, is that allow people to make decisions, even though they may be a decision on a topic that you wouldn't make. Let them learn from that. Maybe it'll come out and that'll be okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Ultimately, though all of you are in the medical profession, you are in the people business. Make no mistake about it. As soon as you accept a leadership role in an organization, you are in the people business. regardless of the business that your business is in. And I want you to think about it this way. You're leading your entire team of people, but you're also trying to satisfy patients who are people, right? And so leadership is all about people. It's all about relationships, and it mostly comes down to trust. We'll continue to talk about that as an underlying theme in our time together as well. I want you to think about this last one, and I've taken this from one of John Maxwell's books on the laws of the irrefutable laws of leadership, and he talks about this one called the law of significance. And in short, what John means by that is that one is too small a number to achieve anything. And if you're like me and you like to read about other business leaders, things that have made people successful, one of the themes that run through all of those biographies is that these leaders admitted that they couldn't have done it alone. And in fact, they recognized the areas where they were most vulnerable. And what did they do? Go ahead and throw it in the chat. What did they do to make up for their own vulnerability? Well, they surround themselves with people smarter than they are. And they surround themselves with people who know about the things they don't know about. Because you see, being a leader isn't about being a know-it-all. You don't have to know everything. Your people don't expect you to know everything. They expect you to have a vision for your organization and to articulate that vision to them and then turn them loose with the incentives and the encouragement to go make that vision happen. That is our job as a leader. Regardless of the title that's on your business card, that's our calling as leaders. Set the vision for our people, give them the tools and encouragement they need to succeed, and then turn them loose. You will be amazed at the things that your people will do for you once you get their buy-in. Now let's talk about who that toughest person to lead is. I hinted about that a little bit ago in our opening slides. And if you recall, toughest person to lead is always ourselves. And some people, when I'm teaching on this topic or presenting it live, people will stop me and they'll say, Ed, but you know, I take care of who I am and I'm trying to learn. I think I lead myself quite well. I'm not here to tell you you're not, but I'm here to tell you that we are the toughest person to lead. You see, leading ourselves is a full-time job. And the reason for that is we're human, just like our people. We make mistakes, just like our people. We have emotions, just like our people. We have bad days, just like our people. We can't allow the bad days and the emotions and the feelings, though, to define who we are. In fact, one of the best managers I ever worked for, one of his flaws was that he would blow hot and cold. In other words, you know, there were just some days, it wasn't that he was a jerk, but he was just standoffish. And I never quite understood it. And I would start to think, well, did I do something? Did I say something? Is our relationship going south? But I learned that when he would get under stress, that was how he reacted. When he was a little more relaxed, he was jovial. He was the best manager ever. And so it's tough, again, to be the leader and to lead ourselves. And here's one of the biggest challenges. We don't often see ourselves as we see others. And here's what I mean by that. I want you to think about the last thing that you set your mind out to do, but that you didn't achieve. Think about whatever that happens to be. And I'm willing to bet if I said to you, well, why didn't you achieve that? You would give me a list of reasons. We'll stop short of calling them excuses, but you will probably give me a list of reasons. Well, my son got sick. My daughter's travel schedule got in the way. My spouse was on a business trip. There will be all kinds of reasons. And so we judge ourselves sometimes by our intent to do things. But what do we do with other people? We judge them on their outcomes. Now, in the business sense, we need outcomes, right? We need people to achieve goals for us. That's why we have performance management systems in our organizations. But I want you to come back to, why do we hold other people to a standard sometimes that's higher than what we hold ourselves to? And so the next time you find yourself wanting to make excuses, and believe me, I'm there. The things that we're talking about, I struggle with sometimes as well. That when you're ready to make an excuse for why you didn't get something done, really take a look at it. Would you allow that same excuse from one of your people? We can't have it both ways. We must ensure we are ourselves to an even higher standard than what we hold our people to. That is the true difference between the leaders who make it. And when I say make it, they get results for their organizations. Their people love work for them. People would run through walls for these kind of leaders. Versus the leaders who struggle to keep it all together and who struggle to ensure that their business is headed in the right direction. So let's talk about some keys to leading ourselves. So first, based on some of the things I just mentioned, is self-discipline. It's tough. We're in a virtual conference right now. Are you focused on the content, or are you also answering emails? Are you running around taking care of the dog and just allowing these things to play? How focused are you in getting the things done that you need to get done? Maybe you're still at work because you're still seeing patients right now. And so people may be knocking on your door and those kinds of things are happening. These are all challenges that we all face. The question is, how do we discipline ourselves? One of the things that I like to ensure that I do is every day take some time for some professional development. Some days it's more than others. Some days it's only 5 or 10 minutes that I can listen to a podcast or watch a video or read a chapter in a book. Other days I can set aside more time. But every single day I want to challenge you to build self-development in. Now, I've had people say, well, Ed, you own your own business, you're self-employed, you can do whatever you want. I'm no different than all of you. My phone rings with customer things. I get emails, I've got projects I need. There are things bombarding me just like they're bombarding you. But it comes back to the discipline of making sure that time is set aside to work on ourselves. In fact, it got so bad for me about 2 years ago that I realized I do all these speaking engagements and I coach leaders and I train organizations. And I realized, gosh, when was the last time I did any kind of personal self-development for me? And so it was the classic case of the cobbler's kids having no shoes. I'm out here preaching, we got to work on ourselves, and I'm doing these things for other people, and I wasn't doing anything for me. And I had to take a step back. And that's when I decided to go get certified as a Maxwell team member, because I knew that would enrich who I am as a coach and trainer. And the second bullet point here can certainly help. Can you find an accountability partner? That's really all a good business coach is an accountability partner. And so I would say, do you have someone that you've got a great relationship with who could be your accountability partner? That they'll follow up with you to ensure that you're doing the things you need to do, that you're learning the things you need to learn, you're working on your weaknesses, you're developing your strengths. There is power in accountability. And again, because it's so hard to lead ourselves, sometimes we fail to hold ourselves accountable. And so that external accountability can be huge for us. Now, here we are talking about how to be a leader worth following. And the next bullet point says, learn followership. Well, here's the thing. People who lead themselves well know they can't always trust themselves. And so that's where the accountability comes in. But from a learning followership, there's always someone out there who knows something that we need to know. And so who can you pick as a mentor out there? Maybe it's someone that whose books you've read from a business perspective and you enjoy that. Follow them on social media. Read more about them. But above all with these things is patience. Yes, I want you to have discipline. Yes, I want you to be self-accountable. But be patient with yourself. You're going to fall. It's okay. I fall. I still make mistakes on the leadership front. There are still weaknesses I'm trying to figure out. There are strengths I want to make stronger. I believe that leadership is not something that we attain. It's something that we evolve through. And so if we're going to lead ourselves well, and we have to before we ever worry about leading our team well, it starts with these 4 items. Because ultimately, nothing is going to prove your ability to lead others well from day to day than how you lead yourself well from day to day. It all starts with you. Now let's talk about choices. You see, when we make choices, decisions in critical moments, it's those moments that can help form us and define us and inform others about who we are. Some would argue that this is the beginnings of integrity, right? The decisions you make when no one else is watching. And there is that from a self-leadership standpoint. But for those of us that are in leadership roles in our organizations, these critical decisions, these critical choices that we make during tough times inform others about who we are. And that's about setting the vision, again, for our team. We're in tough times right now. Many of your businesses have probably had to pivot in some way, shape, or form. Heck, just look at the conference. AAOE has taken this entire conference online. They've pivoted. That's a critical choice. Why did they make it? Because they felt that they had an agenda so full of knowledge and information for their members that they didn't want to just up and cancel it. So their team figures out, how can we get this knowledge? How do we get these speakers to still deliver the information that we want our membership to hear about? Simple, we take it online. But that's a critical choice in a tough situation. It's not as easy as just hopping on Zoom. There's a lot of coordination, as you can imagine, going on in the background with AAOE staff, where they're having to maybe redo work that was already done to set the conference up. And all the work that was done to set up a physical in-person conference was just tossed out the window, right? But I think it informs AAOE's position about who they are for their members. And no, they haven't paid me to say that. It's just an observation. And so if you want to gain influence with your people, help them to solve problems when they ask. And that's key, when they ask. I want to tell you a little bit of a story here because I think it helps to illustrate the point. There's a little boy on the beach, and high tide has now gone out, and it's left all these starfish stranded on the beach. Now, if you know something about starfish, they don't move very fast and they can't live on the dry beach. So they're going to die. And there's hundreds, maybe thousands of them lying on the beach. And the little boy, he's walking along, he's picking up and he's throwing them back in the water. And he's doing it joyfully. Now, coming the other direction on the beach is an old man. And the old man says, "Son, what are you doing here?" And he says, "I'm making a difference." And the old man says, "What do you mean you're making a difference?" He says, "Well, I'm putting the starfish back into the water where they can live." And the old man says, "Do you see all of these thousands? You can't possibly make a difference, son." And the little boy picks up a starfish and he throws it back in the water and he says, "I just made a difference for that one." Now think about the wisdom in that story. And I love that story. I love it. Because that tells us, I think, a critical piece in what we need to do for our people. That we are there for them when they need us. When they need the life preserver thrown. That's what we're there for. We're not there to ensure that they never ever get in the deep water. Right? That's not our job as leaders. In fact, some of your defining moments, some of the things that probably have led you to where you are today is probably because you were in the deep water and you weren't quite sure how to swim, and maybe you were treading water for a long time till you figured it out, but you figured it out, and that made you better for being the leader you are today. So we have to allow our people sometimes to be in the deep water and treading until they say, "Hey boss, I need some help." And that's when we step in. You see, it's the poor leaders that say, "Figure it out on your own," when someone has asked for help. If they're not asking for help, why should we allow them to continue to figure it out? Because there's another old saying that says, if you give a man a fish, he eats for the day, but if you teach him to fish, he eats for a lifetime, right? We have to allow our people to figure some things out on their own so that they learn to put fires out and they don't need us. I'm actually a believer that if your organization can run as smoothly when you're not there as when you are, that is the sign of a good leader. Most people would laugh and say, "No, it's not. It's a sign that we don't need the leader." No, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, that tells me that you've done a great job getting your people ready to take on responsibilities and make critical decisions so that you can take a vacation, or God forbid you get ill, or you need to care for a family member, and you can step out of that role for a day, a week, an extended period of time, and things run. That's the sign of good leadership. And so when you think about the decisions you have to make in critical times in your organization's cycle, maybe you have the opportunity to open up another office, to add on to your existing facility, to add another shift, offer a different service, whatever it happens to be. We don't want to be the person alone on the sand dune, right? Keeping our people away and we're just going to make that decision. We want to pull them up, allow them to help us make the decision, and then send them out to work on the things that they need to work on to help that vision come to life. Now, invariably, when we make decisions, we're going to be criticized. I frankly am amazed that anyone in their right mind gets into politics, because no matter what your views are, whoever an elected official is, no matter what they do, there's someone saying, usually 50% of the people are saying, "That's messed up, that's the wrong way to do it." Criticism will always be there. But here's a thought on criticism. You can avoid it. It's easy, says Aristotle. Don't do anything, don't say anything, and don't be anything. And you can avoid criticism. Pretty wise words, right? And I know I struggle with this. I mean, I'll bear some skeletons. I struggle with criticism. Um, it was when someone challenges me on an idea, tells me my idea is garbage or whatever, I struggle with that. And so I'm human as well. It's how we handle it. That's what happens. Okay, that's where the magic is. How often do you go out to eat when we're allowed to go out to eat again? And you have a favorite restaurant that you enjoy. But someone says, oh gosh, I had the seafood there one time. It was horrible. And my waitress, she was terrible. And the cook, well, he was rude. And their experience was completely different. You say, well, gosh, I wonder why. Did the restaurant have a bad day? Was everyone in there having a bad day? Because I liked the place. Well, we have to put some perspective on it, right? As leaders, we give the critics only enough time as they deserve. Here's what I mean by that. We have to ask ourselves, why was the criticism given? And here's how I like to think about that. If the criticism was given with the idea of improvement, then it's probably something we want to listen to. So I like to ask myself, okay, who's the person criticizing me? That's important, right? Do I have respect for the person who's criticizing me? Do I desire to hear from them? Would I, if they gave me a compliment, would that impact me as much as the criticism? Because if it's not, if it's people that I don't know that are criticizing me, I've got to let that go. And if you're like me, that's hard, but we have to let that go. If there's someone criticizing us that we don't respect, we probably need to let that go. The next thing, how was the criticism given? In other words, was it given lovingly, caringly, with the interest of helping us to change? Or was it given as an attack and as an attempt to tear us down? If it's an attempt to tear us down, we need to let that go. And the third question that I like to ask is, why was it given? Did the person giving the criticism want us to do better? So you leave that review on Yelp about your favorite restaurant. Gee, it's always so good, but today the food showed up cold, and it just, if we're sharing it because we so enjoy going to that restaurant, we want them to improve, that's good feedback. And places of business need to hear those things, right? You are all in the public service sector. You need to hear when one of your patients is not being cared for in the way you want them to be cared for so that you can improve. And so while I do say we need to take criticism with a grain of salt, I also say if we think about who's giving it, how and why it's being given, and if we can answer all those and say, yeah, this criticism is coming at me as a way to help me get better, get stronger, get faster, great. Then let's listen to it, let's learn from it, and let's fix those things that need to be fixed. Because the reality is, regardless of those questions and how we answer them, what most determines whether we grow from that criticism is one thing. Go ahead and type what you think it is in the chat box before I give you the answer. There is one thing that will determine whether you grow as a result of that criticism or grown as a result of that criticism. It's your attitude. Our attitude speaks so loudly that people can't hear the words that we speak. This is probably a cliche that I've got on the screen right now. Love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Right? Does that mean we're not going to have hard days? Does that mean that every single day I'm like, yes, I love my job? No, of course we're going to have tough days. But here's where attitude comes into play. How often do you find yourself saying, I have to do, and then fill in that blank? I have to do this. I have to take my child to softball practice. I have to have a discussion with one of my people over their behavior. I have to go to the office today. Whatever it is, right? That's an attitude. That statement is an attitude. It's like you're being compelled to do that. But what if you changed it up? What if you said, I get to take my daughter to softball practice. I get to have a discussion with one of my people about their performance. I get to go into the office today. Do you hear the difference? It's all perspective. It's all attitude. And so when we think about following our passions, it's about our attitude. And if your passion is being the best leader you can be for your people, then we need to change our mindset to say, I get to lead my people today. I get to help them set a vision. I get to help them stay on track. I get to help develop them. I get to move this organization forward. You see, our attitude is the key to finding our true potential as leaders. And that's where passion comes from, and that's where loving what we do comes from. I want you to think about Jack Welch. Of course, he recently passed away. But he says that the world will belong to passionate, driven leaders. And probably even more importantly, he says, these people have enormous amounts of energy, but they can also energize those that they lead. Take a look around your workplace. What is the vibe that's going on there? Do people have to come to work in your workplace? Or do they get to come to work in your workplace? Those are two very different mindsets. And that speaks to the culture that has been developed in your workplace. And I believe culture starts from the top. I was working with an organization, professional services firm, on some cultural issues. And the owner said to me, Ed, I don't get these millennials and the things they want. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, they want stuff that really doesn't matter. I said, give me an example. He says, well, an employee meeting the other day, they asked me if we could put a Keurig in the break room with all kinds of different flavored coffees. And I said to them, we've got a coffee pot in there and we've got regular and decaf. What's the big deal? Now, I kind of laughed and I said, how much would it cost you to buy the Keurig and keep it well stocked with seasonal coffees and teas and hot cocos and things like that? And he said, well, I haven't looked at it yet, but probably wouldn't cost me a whole lot more than what the coffee's costing me now. And so I looked at him and I said, then why don't you do it? And he didn't have an answer other than he just thought it was a silly request, right? But you see, this is about leadership and energy. It's a small decision, I grant you, to say, yeah, let's put the Keurig machine in the break room and let's have a nice little selection of coffees and teas for people. But do you see that little decision leads to energy? People see that, wow, we asked for something relatively small. Leaders didn't balk at it. They gave us what we wanted. It makes us a little bit happier. Makes us want to come to work every day. Makes us not have to stop at the coffee joint to spend $5 for a cup of coffee to get something flavored because we can wait till we get to the office. You see, it's the little things in life that make us or break us as leaders. Our people are looking for the little things. Because you see, the big things will come, right? They will come, and they don't come that often, but they do come. And oftentimes, those aren't the things that we get hammered on because hindsight will always be the judge of those big decisions. But the here and now, the everyday little decisions that you make, those are the things that determine how people view you as a leader. Because people don't care what you know. They don't care how smart you are. They don't care about the letters after your name. They don't care what college you went to. They don't care how many plaques are on your wall. They don't care about any of that until they know one thing. I want you to jot in the chat room, what is the one thing that people want to know first? I'll let you think on that for a moment. They want to know that you care. That's where leadership starts. It starts with caring. If our people don't have a sense that we care about them, they may follow us only begrudgingly or because we've got that positional leadership that we talked about earlier, but they won't joyfully follow us and they won't be energized. And business results only come from an energized workforce. I can't stress that enough. No amount of heavy-handed fist banging is going to drive results like having an energized workforce. Again, I'm not saying that everything is coming up roses all the time. It is still work. We still have problems to solve. But if as leaders we can energize our people, watch out. They will run through walls for us. They will drive business results for us. They will take care of our patients better than any of our competition will, all because the energy that we put out there. Now, I say these high fluffy things, time to get real. One of the biggest pitfalls for potential leaders and those of us in leadership positions is that we focus too much on a vision and not enough on reality. So I've talked a lot about vision, and it's important. It's critical. As leaders, we're expected to set a vision. However, our head can't be up in the clouds, right? That vision has to be grounded in reality, facts, what our people can do for us. And so we have to hear both the good and the bad from our people. Remember the old fairy tale, the king that had no clothes, right? The tailor had made him supposedly this exquisite suit, and he was walking around naked, and no one had the guts to tell the king that he was walking around naked. If we are surrounded by, call them the yes people, right? People that always say yes to us. Yes, boss, on it. Yes, boss, everything's great. We can't have that. We have to have people surrounding us who are willing to challenge us. We talked about this a little bit earlier with accountability, okay? But we have to be willing to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that's our reality. I was working with an organization, happened to be a medical provider, and their CEO brought me in because the HR function was just not functioning in this organization. This was an 800-person medical practice, so quite a large medical practice. And the CEO said to me, Ed, this HR function is just not, they're inhibiting my ability to grow this organization. And so I started the project off by talking with each of the HR team members. There was 8 of them. And each one of them said to me, when I asked them, what is your job here? And so keep in mind, I talked to everyone from the director of HR down to the recruiters, the HR admins, everyone in between, you name it. Each one of them said, it's my job to make the employees happy. Now I'm going to set that aside for a moment, because that made my HR flare up and get real angry, because that's not HR's job in an organization. Okay, to make people happy. Happiness is a choice, right? The problem was that they were failing miserably at making people happy. So 8 people in the department all saying, yes, that's our goal, is to make people happy. But when I went out and I talked to the docs and I talked to the nurses and the admins and service providers, you name it, I struggled to find someone who could tell me something good that HR was doing for them. And in fact, I heard these crazy stories about how one lady told me how, yeah, I've been working here for 6 months, and just last week HR called me to see if I wanted to come in for an interview. And I said, what, for like a promotion or something? She says, oh no, they didn't even realize I was working here. And I told them I've been getting paychecks for 6 months, right? Did she ever tell HR? I mean, who are we surrounding ourselves with? If you're honest with yourself and you're willing to chat with people in your organization, you're going to hear stories like that. I guarantee it. You're going to hear stories like that. Maybe not that drastic, but what's really going on in our organizations? Do we take time to walk around and figure out how to build the relationships with people who will tell us what's going on so that we can redefine the reality of our workplaces so that it marries up with our vision? So often, leaders fail because they're not able to bridge the gap between the reality of the situation and the vision that they have, and get people to see what the steps are to pull those things together. So don't keep your head in the clouds of your vision saying, well, I'm a leader. I'm supposed to be a visionary. I'm not supposed to worry about the details. Yes, I would agree. There are other people around you to worry about the details, but you have to be willing to listen to them about those very details. So from a reality check standpoint, let's go back to our self-leadership. Have you ever admitted your weaknesses? And I don't mean to yourself or to your closest confidant. Do your people know what your weaknesses are? Some of you are saying, oh my gosh, I would never, ever do that. They would lose respect. Come on, let's get real. This is our reality check. I'm here to tell you, they already know your weaknesses. They already do. They see it. So the only thing that admitting your weaknesses will do is that your folks know now that you know. They know that your head isn't in the clouds anymore. So it's okay to admit when we've made a mistake. It's okay to say, yeah, I messed that decision up. That didn't go well. It's okay. We want to keep realistic people around us. Again, not yes people, not people who are going to weave our invisible coat for us, people grounded in reality. Whether that's our HR directors, our finance directors, our operational directors, whoever it happens to be, who are the people that we need around us to keep us grounded in reality, knowing where we're going and the hurdles that it's going to take to get there. Many of you, I hope, have read the book by Jim Collins, Good to Great. And there's one quote in there that's always stood with me. And he says, you absolutely cannot make a series of good decisions without first confronting the brutal facts. So if you are struggling to hit your business goals in certain areas, have you looked at the facts behind them? Not the excuses for why things weren't, but the true facts of why the goals weren't hit. Let me give you an example. I had a friend who's in the banking industry, and he recently left his employer because of unrealistic performance expectations. And usually when you hear that, you say, oh yeah, right, unrealistic. Come on, Ed. Hear me out. The branch he was in charge of was in a metropolitan area, kind of a center, served a center city type of clientele. The vast majority of these folks were living paycheck to paycheck. They would come in, they would literally cash their paycheck, or if they had direct deposit, they would come in and they would withdraw those funds. Okay. Many were on some type of public assistance, food stamps, welfare, whatever. Okay. One of the things that he was held accountable to was writing a certain dollar amount in loans and credit cards and that sort of thing on a regular basis, monthly, quarterly, etc. And he would talk to his superiors and say, look, you're holding me to these standards, but look at the demographic that we're serving with this branch. These folks are renters. I can't sell them a home equity loan. They don't have a home. I can't sell them a credit card. Their credit rating is too low to qualify. You know, there were legitimate business facts about why he could not hit his numbers. And yet management continued to say, doesn't matter, sell, sell, sell. And so what happened to that branch? Constant turnover amongst even the frontline tellers, constant turnover in the assistant branch managers. And finally, my friend left because the reality check wasn't there. The decisions and the performance goals were not based on facts. So we have to be willing to ask for honesty from other people and then hear it and invite those fresh eyes in. Who haven't we talked to in our organization well enough to really get an idea of what's going on in their area of responsibility? Who else can we ask about? Who can we ask about ourselves and our leadership and our style, who will not criticize us, but help us to open our eyes to how we are or are not leading our people? And so that leads me into our next topic, which is, how do we continue to learn? How do we make our own personal growth a priority? If we're going to surround ourselves with people who will give us the brutal facts, who will be honest with us perhaps about our shortcomings, what should we do about those things? I would say you need to have a personal growth plan. So I want you to ask yourself, one, do I have a personal growth plan? And two, have I been sticking to it? Don't put that in the chat, but jot that down on your notepad. Do I have a plan, and have I stuck to it? You see, if you're a true leader, you learn continually. Not just once a year by going to a conference, not just once a quarter by listening to a podcast, continually. Good leaders learn continually. I've already mentioned one of the things that I try to do is every day do something that supports my self-development. And if I'm going to be the best I can be for my clients, to bring the best and the brightest ideas to them, I have to expose myself to the best and the brightest ideas. I've got to expose myself to the ideas that aren't working, that are really crappy too, and learn from organizations that are making these hard mistakes so I can bring those solutions. It's critical for all of us. In fact, I was recently doing some research, not just on the amount of time people should spend on personal development, but the amount of money they should spend on their personal development. And I was kind of amazed. Most self-development, self-help experts say we should be spending 10% of our annual income on self-development. Now, that before you get crazy, that doesn't mean you're actually writing the checks, right? I mean, if your company paid for you to come to this conference, okay, how much was that? So look at it in those terms, right? How much, whether you're writing the check or your company or someone else, or maybe it's a free event, right? Lots of free stuff you can do out there, but how much time and investment are you making in your personal development? It's absolutely critical. The old idea that, well, I graduated from school and I got that nice sheepskin and it's hanging on the wall there and I don't ever have to learn again. Maybe we enjoyed that for a week or two out of college. It's just it's non-existent anymore. So how do we do this? How do we continue to make personal growth a priority? Okay. First, we invest in ourselves. The biggest piece of homework that I believe you can take from this session is, do you have that plan for personal development and are you sticking to it? If not, go make one. If you have one and aren't sticking to it, what's it going to take from a discipline standpoint to get you to stick to it? Because I can guarantee you, if you invest in yourself first, becoming the best leader that you can be, it will pay monster dividends for you. Not just in terms of making you a better leader, making you more valuable to your organization, and perhaps maybe making you more valuable for your next career step, whether that be with your current organization or in a position of higher responsibility elsewhere. That's what investing in ourselves and being continual learners do. You see, I'm always skeptical when someone says to me, Ed, I've got 20 years experience. Okay, wait a minute. You've been in the same job for 20 years. So do you have 20 years of experience, or do you have 1 year of experience learned 20 times over? Do you hear the difference? It's huge. It's a huge difference. So looking back over the last 4 or 5 years, what have you done that's gotten you to where you are today, and what's still holding you back? Lay out a plan for your development in the next 3 years. What does that look like? What do you need to learn that's going to make you better at what you're doing or get you better prepared for your next step? Once you do that for yourself, remember earlier on I said your people don't care about any of that stuff you got on the wall until they know that you care about them? Take a look at the third bullet point. One of the ways that your people will know that you care about them is if you work with them on a growth plan for them. I am a big believer that as leaders, we have to challenge our people to grow as well. And that doesn't necessarily mean we're the ones doing the teaching, right? It could mean that they're going to certain conference sessions, that they are taking some self-development courses. So I recall one of my last in-house positions, my manager came to me and she said, Ed, it's been a while since we've really focused on your professional development. I'd like you to think about some things you'd like to work on. I'll think about some things and let's get back together. And we did that. And we agreed that because I do a lot of compensation work with clients, that the company would pay for me to get my certified compensation professional designation. And what's so important about that in the context of developing a growth environment for the people that you lead is that it wasn't just that they were encouraging me to go do this. There was a financial backing too. This was about a 2 to 2.5 year process with numerous out-of-town trips to go to the sessions. There were exam fees. Of course, I was out of the office. And so you had all of these things coming together, that it wasn't just the commitment of, we want you to develop yourself. There was the financial backing, and there was the support of being out of the office for days at a time, multiple times per year, to go for this self-development. And so when we think about how we keep learning and keep growing for ourselves, when we think about this last bullet point and how it relates to how we can grow the people that we lead, we have to remember that the only way that our company can grow is if we grow as leaders and if we can grow the other leaders in the organization. The minute that we stop growing, we start to hurt our organization. And one of the things that has always amazed me is when the economy goes south, things get tough. What's one of the first things we stop doing? We take away training budgets. And if you think about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Just when we need our people at their absolute best, they're most efficient, they're most productive, we take away the tools that allow them to do that, which is ongoing training and development. So I would encourage you to make sure that your culture supports training and development of your people. Because here's the thing, if it doesn't, we know that the younger generations, the millennials and now the Gen Zs that are coming into the organization, they're not going to stick around. They want upward mobility for sure, but they want ongoing learning and development opportunities. And if we don't provide that for them, guess what happens? People quit. And you've probably heard this saying before that people quit their bosses and not their companies. And it's very true. I mean, I think personally, when I think back over the organizations that I've left in my career, I left some great organizations. And each time when I look back in hindsight, I left because of a person maybe a little bit further up the chain of command that was just not inspiring me with the vision to stay and to do and to prosper. And so when we think about why people quit people and not companies, it's because we're letting them down. In some way, shape, or form, we are not contributing to their development. We are not allowing them to be all they can be. In fact, studies show that 65% of the time when someone leaves an organization, it has nothing to do with the organization. It has to do with their supervisor, their manager, someone along that chain of command who's not giving them the type of support that they need. And not just on the learning and development front. Obviously, when you think about all the things that we've talked about so far today, those are all things, if not done well, could lead to someone leaving our organization. And so what we really have to ask ourselves is, well, if people were going to quit me, what would that look like? In other words, what would I be doing if they were quitting me? Let's talk about that next. So people quit leaders who are these four things. And I want you to take these and really digest them for a moment. Not because I want you to figure out whether or not you are one of these people, but are there any other leaders in your organization who might also share one of these attributes? You see, we talked earlier about how when you're on top of the mountain and when you pull people up, it kind of makes you stand up taller, sit up straighter kind of thing. And that when you try to keep your weight, you push them down, you make yourself smaller. That's what we're talking about. People that leaders that devalue others will cause people to leave in droves. People want to know that you care. We talked about that earlier. It's so critical. Trust, gosh, when we lose trust, everything's kind of done at that point, right? And so this is probably, it's second on the list. For me, trust is everything, though. You can make some other mistakes that are on this list and maybe get away with it if your people still trust you and you can get things turned around. But once you lose trust, you're probably not going to get things turned around. And so when you think about people who are close-minded, you know, that's someone who's untrustworthy. I unfortunately worked for someone who was very close-minded. In fact, we had done some strategic planning. She brought the entire executive team together and we spent a couple of days strategic planning with where we want to take the organization. And I kid you not, at the end of all this time, she said, well, this is great. It's a great plan, but we're not going to do it. And we all just kind of sat there looking around at each other and said, what just happened? And I'm here to tell you, 6 weeks later, I left the organization. I mean, that told me everything I needed to know. Not only from a time wasting standpoint, but we had a great brain trust there that surrounded the owner. And she wasn't willing to hear us out. We were the ones that were going to make that plan work for that organization. Didn't want to hear us out. That's an untrustworthy leader. Maybe you've heard of the Peter Principle. Bear with me for those of you that have, but if you haven't, it says that we will all eventually get promoted to our individual level of incompetence. And this happens in organizations where, well, you did a good job as a widget maker, so we'll make you supervisor of the widget makers, and you're a good supervisor, so we'll make you plant manager. And we keep moving you up through. Well, if all we're doing is basing your promotions on what you did before, sooner or later, you're going to get a position you can't handle. And there are leaders who maybe through no fault of their own are incompetent. And so people will leave them. And so what those types of leaders need to do is very quickly figure out the things they need to know and learn. Insecure, this is a personal trait, obviously, that some people struggle with. And I know I sometimes struggle with insecurities. You probably struggle with insecurities from time to time as well. And that's okay. But people don't want or need to see that insecurity being worn on your shirt sleeve. When they see the leader wandering around, not sure what to do, not sure how to handle a situation, looking constantly for validation, those traits are going to give people pause, and they're likely going to leave the organization and find an organization that has a leader who's much more secure in themselves. So how do we want to really be a leader worth following? Take a look at this list. Can you take responsibility for the relationships around you, the good ones and the bad ones? It's your job as a leader to set the tone for how relationships work and look in your organization. And so if you see a lot of divisiveness, you see silos that have built up, I will tell you as the leader, that's your fault. You need to take the sledgehammer to those silos. You have to break them down and enforce this idea that relationships are what makes things work in our business. Conducting exit interviews is key. Are you always going to get an honest answer out of people? No, if you're one of the leaders on that previous list, you're insecure, you're untrustworthy. But if you've built good relationships, you will get information. And don't get me wrong, you can be a great leader and people may still leave your organization, and that's okay. Maybe they can't grow any further in your organization. One of my long-term clients lost a great HR person 3 years ago. Last year, she came back. Why? She left. She grew. There was no more growth room for her at the client, but she was with another organization. The HR director left. They went out and recruited this young woman back in to be their HR director. So she had to leave to come back into a higher level. That's okay. Value the people that work for you. Truly value them as people, not just as pawns in the game, not just for what they can do for you. Value them for what they bring to the table every day. And make sure that credibility is a priority in your organization. Not just for you, that you are a credible leader, but that those around you are credible leaders as well. Expect more out of your leadership team. And to me, the leadership team is anyone who is supervising other people. They're a leader. It's not about position. It's not about title. I think the last 2 bullet points on this list are probably the 2 hardest for us as leaders. Maintaining strong emotional health for yourself. Who do you have that you can rely on, confide in? Do you have that mentor, that coach? Maybe it's outside of your organization, someone that you can bounce ideas off of. Do you take care of yourself physically? Do you get the exercise and the mental downtime? Yesterday, I took a 3-mile hike with my daughter, and at one point I must have gotten quiet. She said, "Dad, what you thinking about?" And it was funny because my mind started drifting to things that I can work on with my business, because being out in nature is one of the things that helps me to stay grounded. And I told her that. I said, "Oh, sorry, honey. I started thinking about this one problem." And she says, "Oh, well, what is it?" And we had a little chat about it. She enjoys her time as well by herself and recognizes that, yes, sometimes we need that downtime, that quiet time to let our thoughts settle. But maintaining that teachable spirit. We've talked about that. I said at the beginning that was going to be an underlying current throughout our time together today. And here it is again. Are we willing to be continuous learners as leaders? Now we're just about done. And I want you to think about the legacy that you want to leave others. And when you hear that term legacy, a lot of people say, "What, a legacy? Me? Come on." Think back to one of the first notes I had you write in our session today, and that was the people that had the most influence over you as leaders. Who were they, for good and bad, right? That's a legacy that they've left. Take a look at this quote from Jackie Robinson. It's what we're called to do as leaders, we're called to be significant and have an impact on others. And by doing that, that's how we achieve business results. Bad leaders think they drive business results first and people come second. Absolutely not. We get the business results by being impactful with our people and being significant in their lives. One great book, it's an absolute easy read. Forget the author's name, unfortunately, right now I'm drawing a blank, but it's called Hug Your People. It's a simple little book, and it's written by a gentleman who owns a series of high-end clothing stores in Manhattan and up through Connecticut, and the little things he does for people to make a difference. You see, it's not the big things. It's not the big holiday parties and the big company picnics and all those big things that we do. Engagement happens in the little things. Significance is in the little things. Think about the strongest bonds you have with other people, whether that's your significant other, a child, a sibling, a friend, whatever it is. You're probably realizing that the significant times with those people are in the little things you get to do together, the little laughs that you have together. That's what makes the bond so strong. It's no different in the employment setting, none whatsoever. We're called as leaders to be impactful with our people, to have a significant impact on them, and they want it. Well, as our time is now coming to a close, and we've talked a lot about these gold nuggets, I want you to think about a couple of key things. How can you be a continual learner? How can you learn to surround yourself with people who will make you a better leader, who will help you to face the realities? How will you put in place a personal growth plan for yourself moving forward? You see, so often we go to conferences like this, we hear all these great ideas, and we come back and we put the notes in a drawer and we never get them out again. I remember the last HR department that I ran, sent them off to the National HR Conference. They came back, Ed, we had all these great ideas, and this happened, and that happened, and this happened. And I looked at them and said, okay, so what are we going to do with all this? And that's the response I got. I just got the stare, right? And I said, I want you to go back. We're going to meet again next week. Come back to me with a plan for how we can use some of this information to make this a better place. And so I'm going to ask you to do the same, not just with this session, but with all the sessions you've taken your time to go and listen to. What are you going to do to use that information to make your workplace better? Now more than ever, that's what our people need. I thank you for giving me the last hour and a half of your day to talk about leadership. I thank you for your comments in the chat room. And if I can be of assistance at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. You've got my contact info here on the last screen. Take care and make it a great day.
Thank you so much, Ed, for such a great presentation. And thank you to all our attendees for joining us. Now it's time to enter your CEU checkout code for CNE, CME, HBMA, and NASBA. The checkout code for this session is 281620. Enter this in the mobile app by checking out of the session. For AAPC, please get out your code card. The AAPC code is 68982QGV. If you are earning CNE, please note that you will have to complete the session quiz to earn the credit. We will give you a few moments to enter that now. AAOE staff will also enter it into the chat. That concludes our virtual session. Please return to the virtual hub page to see what's coming up next.